The summer of 2019 sat heavy over Calhoun County, Georgia, like a wool blanket soaked in creek water. It was the kind of heat that warped the asphalt and made mirages shimmer at the far end of every country road. At 9:47 on a Sunday morning, the Buckhorn Fuel and Food off Route 9 was relatively quiet. A few diesel trucks idled near the far pumps. An older white couple filled their minivan by the air pump station. A teenager swept the sidewalk near the entrance with the disinterested strokes of someone counting the minutes until their shift ended. Special Agent Diane Carter pulled her black Chevrolet Tahoe, government-issued, fully loaded, federal license plate that anyone trained in law enforcement would instantly recognize, into pump number 4. She was dressed casually, dark jeans, a navy blue linen blazer over a white tee, aviator sunglasses. Her badge and her Glock 22 were both clipped to her hip, partially visible when the wind caught the hem of her blazer. She had just come off a 36-hour surveillance operation in Atlanta and was running on 2 cups of gas station coffee, 3 hours of sleep, and the kind of deep, bone-level exhaustion that career law enforcement agents know all too well. She swiped her government purchase card at the pump, selected the fuel grade, lifted the nozzle, and reached for her phone to check her messages while the tank filled. There were 14 unread texts, 2 voicemails from her supervisor, Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Holden, and a calendar alert reminding her that her debriefing with Deputy Director Carl Jameson was in 4 hours at the Atlanta field office. She exhaled slowly. She let the morning air wash over her. She looked up at the pale Georgia sky. She had no idea that from inside the Buckhorn Fuel and Food, a man named Todd Whitfield, 23 years old, part-time attendant, full-time gossip, had just picked up the telephone and dialed the non-emergency line of the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department. "Yeah," Todd said, voice low, leaning against the counter while watching Agent Carter through the glass. "There's a black woman out here at Pump 4. She's driving one of them big black SUVs. I don't recognize her, and she's just standing there. Looks suspicious." The dispatcher paused. "Has she done anything, sir?" "She's just standing there," Todd repeated. "You know if it don't look right." It took the dispatcher less than 2 minutes to relay the call. And it took Sheriff Dale Pute, who happened to be parked less than a quarter mile away in the shade of an oak grove eating a sausage biscuit, less than 90 seconds to arrive at Buckhorn Fuel and Food. Dale Pute had been the elected sheriff of Calhoun County for 11 years. Before that, he'd been a deputy for 7. He was the kind of man who believed that the badge he wore was a crown rather than a responsibility. Big through the chest and shoulders with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from Georgia granite. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the expression of a man permanently annoyed at the world around him. His cruiser pulled into the Buckhorn lot with the theatrical flair of someone who wanted to be seen. He didn't use the siren, but he hit the lights, blue and red strobing across the pumps, catching the attention of every single person in that parking lot. He climbed out slowly, deliberately, settling his hat on his head and hooking his thumbs in his belt. Agent Carter looked up from her phone. She watched him approach, with that measured calm assessment she'd spent 12 years training herself to maintain in high-pressure situations. She noted the body language immediately, the performance of authority, the theatrics of the lights, the swagger. She had seen it 1,000 times. She knew exactly what this was. "Morning," she said, her voice level. Pute didn't return the greeting. He stopped 5 feet from her, looking her up and down, then at the Tahoe, then back at her. "This your vehicle?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Got proof of that?" She set her phone on the roof of the vehicle. "Identification." Pute's jaw tightened. He didn't like her tone. He didn't like how still she was. Most people got nervous when he walked up on them like this. This woman just stood there looking at him like she was solving an equation. "I'm asking the questions here," he said. "I had a call about a suspicious individual operating a possibly stolen vehicle. You match the description." Agent Carter blinked once, slowly. "What description would that be?" "Black female, black SUV, Route 9. She said nothing for a moment. Then she reached very slowly and deliberately toward her hip, keeping her hands visible. "I'm going to show you my credentials," she said, the words crisp and professional. "Federal agent. I'm reaching for my badge." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Pute barked, and his hand dropped to his sidearm. Everything happened fast after that. His deputy, Greg Fenton, 29, 3 years on the job, had pulled in behind the cruiser. He came around the front of the car at a jog, hand already on his holster. The teenage boy who had been sweeping the sidewalk stopped sweeping. The older couple by the air pump station froze. Todd Whitfield had come out from behind the counter and was now standing in the doorway of the convenience store, watching with wide eyes. And Patricia Coleman, a 47-year-old retired school teacher who had stopped for coffee and was sitting in her Honda Civic between pumps 2 and 3, quietly lifted her cell phone and pressed record. "Get your hands on the vehicle," Fenton shouted. "Sir," Agent Carter said, and her voice was extraordinary under the circumstances. Calm, hard, clear as a bell. "I am a federal law enforcement agent. I am going to reach for my credentials. I need you to hear that and acknowledge it before I move my hands. Up against the vehicle now." Fenton screamed. Sheriff Dale Pute looked at her for a long moment. Then something flickered across his face, something between contempt and certainty, the look of a man who has already decided the truth before the evidence arrives. "Cuff her," he said to Fenton. And that was the exact moment the entire department's future began to unravel. But as Deputy Fenton's hands closed around her wrists and the cold steel clicked shut, Special Agent Diane Carter did the one thing no one in that parking lot expected. She stayed perfectly still because she knew exactly what was about to happen next. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that carried across the quiet Sunday morning parking lot like the closing of a vault door. Cold steel bit into Diane Carter's wrists, not painfully. She had been trained to endure far worse, but with the unmistakable finality of metal meeting flesh. She did not resist. She did not shout. She did not even flinch. Instead, she allowed Deputy Greg Fenton to guide her hands behind her back and press her palms flat against the warm black paint of her own government-issued Tahoe. Her cheek rested lightly against the roof, where she had set her phone moments earlier. The screen was still lit, displaying the unread texts from Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Holden. One of them, she knew without looking, read, "Debrief at 1400 sharp. Don't be late, Carter." Across the lot, Patricia Coleman's phone stayed steady in her hands. The retired schoolteacher had not moved from the driver's seat of her Honda Civic. She had pressed record the instant she saw the sheriff's lights flash, long before she understood who the woman at Pump 4 really was. Now the red recording blinked like a quiet heartbeat, capturing every word, every movement, every second of what was unfolding. Sheriff Dale Pute stepped closer, boots crunching gravel. He leaned in until his breath was close enough for Diane to smell the sausage biscuit still on it. "You should have just cooperated," he said, low enough that only she and Fenton could hear. "Would have been easier for everybody." Diane met his eyes without blinking. "I am cooperating," she replied, voice even, almost conversational. "I informed you I am a federal agent. I informed you I was reaching for credentials. I informed you I have not committed any crime. You chose not to hear any of those things." Pute's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more the ghost of one. "Honey," he said, "you're standing in my county. My rules." He turned away, already dismissing her, and nodded toward the Tahoe. "Open it up, Greg. Let's see what we're really dealing with." Fenton hesitated for half a second, the first crack in the performance. He glanced at Diane, then at the sheriff, then back at the vehicle. "You need a warrant for that," Diane said quietly. "Or my consent. You have neither." Pute barked a short, dismissive laugh. "Probable cause, sweetheart. Suspect in vehicle theft. I can search incident to arrest." He reached through the cracked driver's side window, left open because Diane had been fueling, and popped the door handle from the inside. The interior light came on. There, on the center console, half covered by a manila folder stamped with classified markings, sat a second FBI badge wallet, identical to the one now dangling awkwardly from Fenton's fingers after he had unclipped it from her hip during the pat-down. Pute picked it up. He flipped it open. The gold shield caught the morning sun. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Diane M. Carter. Badge number 22,479. He stared at it. For the first time that morning, the theatrical certainty on his face fractured. Fenton leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening. "Sheriff, that's real." Pute closed the wallet, set it back on the console, turned slowly. Diane was still leaning against the Tahoe, hands cuffed behind her, posture unchanged. She looked at him the way a bomb technician looks at a device that has just stopped ticking, calm, clinical, waiting. Pute's radio crackled. He ignored it. Instead, he stepped back one pace, then another, as though physical distance could undo what he had just seen. The older couple by the air pump had their phones out now, too. The teenage sweeper had frozen mid-stroke, broom forgotten. Todd Whitfield, still in the doorway of the store, looked like he had swallowed something sharp. And Patricia Coleman's camera never wavered. Pute cleared his throat. "Uncuff her," he said to Fenton. The words came out flat, almost mechanical. Fenton blinked. "Sir, I said uncuff her. Now." Fenton fumbled with the keys. The cuffs came off. Diane straightened slowly, rolling her shoulders once, the motion so controlled it looked rehearsed. She reached up, rubbed her wrists once, more out of habit than necessity, then turned to face the sheriff fully. Pute tried to recover the swagger. "Look, ma'am, there was a call. Description matched. We had to." Diane held up one hand. Not aggressive, just enough to stop the sentence. "I understand procedure," she said. "What I don't understand is why, after I identified myself as a federal agent, twice, you elected to disregard that identification, place me under arrest, and begin an unconstitutional search of a federal vehicle." Pute opened his mouth, closed it. Diane continued, voice never rising. "You now have two choices, Sheriff. You can release me immediately, return my property, and we can pretend this was a misunderstanding that ends here, or I can place a single phone call that will have DOJ Civil Rights Division investigators on the ground in Calhoun County by tomorrow morning." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle. "And trust me," she added softly, "they will not be coming to talk to me." For the first time in 11 years as sheriff, Dale Pute felt the ground shift beneath him. He didn't know it yet, but the shift had already begun years earlier. Buried in 47 citizen complaints, enclosed without action internal affairs files, in quiet conversations between deputies who never quite dared speak louder. He only knew that right now, in this parking lot, under the eyes of half a dozen cell phones, the woman he had just handcuffed was no longer the suspect. She was the reckoning. What Sheriff Pute did next? Reach for his radio and bark an order that would echo far beyond that Sunday morning was the first real mistake he made after the cuffs came off, and it was the mistake that would cost him everything. Sheriff Dale Pute stood frozen for perhaps 3 full seconds, long enough for the parking lot to feel like it had stopped breathing. The strobe of his cruiser lights kept sweeping across everyone's faces in slow, accusing arcs. Red, blue, red, blue. Patricia Coleman's phone never wavered. The retired teacher's thumb stayed pressed to the record button as though she understood, instinctively, that this footage might one day be entered into evidence. Pute's right hand moved first, almost on reflex. He lifted the radio mic clipped to his shoulder, thumbed the transmit button, and spoke in the clipped, authoritative tone he had used for 11 years to make problems disappear. "Dispatch, this is Pute. Cancel any backup on the suspicious vehicle call at Buckhorn. Situation resolved. Stand down." A beat of silence on the radio. Then the dispatcher's voice, tentative. 10-4, Sheriff. Standing down. He clipped the mic back, exhaled through his nose, and turned to Diane as though the last 90 seconds had been a minor paperwork error. "Ma'am," he said, the word coming out stiff. "You're free to go. We'll chalk this up to a good faith mistake. No harm, no foul." Diane did not move. She rubbed her wrists once more, slowly, deliberately, then reached into the open driver's door of the Tahoe and retrieved her second badge wallet from the console. She held it up between 2 fingers so the gold shield caught the light again. "I'm not going anywhere yet," she said. Pute's jaw worked side to side. "You're not under arrest. You're free to leave." "I know I'm free to leave," Diane replied. "I'm choosing not to, because what just happened here was not a mistake. It was a choice. and choices have consequences. She turned slightly, addressing Fenton directly for the first time. "Deputy, I need you to return my service weapon and primary badge immediately. They are federal property. You are currently in possession of both." Fenton looked at Pute. Pute gave the smallest nod. Fenton stepped forward, handed over the Glock and the badge wallet he had unclipped earlier. Diane holstered the weapon with practiced economy, clipped the badge back to her hip, and then, very deliberately, pulled out her phone. The screen was still open to her call log. She tapped one contact, SSA Holden Cell. Before she pressed call, she looked straight at Pute. "I'm going to make one phone call," she said. "When I do, this stops being a Calhoun County matter. It becomes a federal civil rights investigation under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 and the DOJ's Pattern or Practice Authority. Your department will be asked to produce every use of force report, every citizen complaint, every internal affairs disposition going back 15 years. Every single one." Pute's face had gone the color of old asphalt. "You don't have to do that," he said. "We can handle this locally." Diane's thumb hovered over the green button. "You already handled it locally," she said. "That's the problem." She pressed call. The line rang twice. "Holden," came the crisp voice on the other end. "Patricia, it's Diane. I'm at Buckhorn Fuel and Food, Route 9, Calhoun County. I've just been unlawfully detained and handcuffed by Sheriff Dale Pute and Deputy Greg Fenton after clearly identifying myself as a federal agent. Multiple witnesses recorded the entire incident. I need you to open a preliminary inquiry and advise the Civil Rights Division. I'm staying on scene until federal marshals or your team arrive." There was a 2-second pause, the professional equivalent of a sharply indrawn breath. "Understood," Holden said. "I'm notifying the section chief now. Stay safe. Do not leave the scene unless it becomes unsafe to remain. I'll have agents en route within the hour." Diane ended the call. She looked at Pute. "They're coming," she said simply. Pute's shoulders sagged half an inch, the first visible surrender. He turned to Fenton. "Greg, secure the scene. No one leaves until I say so." Fenton nodded, but his eyes kept flicking to Diane's badge, then to the phone still recording from 3 different angles. Pute walked a few paces away, pulled out his own phone, and dialed a number he hadn't called in years, the personal cell of the county attorney, Robert Haynes. When Haynes answered, Pute didn't bother with pleasantries. "Bob, it's Dale. We've got a situation at Buckhorn. Federal agent. I need you here. Now." On the other end of the line, Robert Haynes, 61, lifelong resident of Calhoun County, keeper of a private laptop folder labeled simply Pute, closed his eyes for a moment. He had been waiting for this phone call longer than anyone knew. "I'm on my way," he said. And somewhere in that simple sentence was the sound of a file cabinet drawer finally sliding open after 15 years of staying shut. By the time County Attorney Robert Haynes pulled into the Buckhorn lot 12 minutes later, the first news van was already cresting the hill on Route 9, but what Haynes carried in his briefcase would ensure that the story breaking across local screens that afternoon would look nothing like the one Sheriff Pute still hoped to control. Robert Haynes pulled his silver Buick Enclave into the Buckhorn lot at 10:03 a.m., exactly 12 minutes after Sheriff Pute's call. The county attorney drove the speed limit the entire way, not out of caution, but because he needed every one of those minutes to steady himself. In the passenger seat rested a slim black leather briefcase he had kept locked in his home office safe for nearly 3 years. The combination was his wedding anniversary. The contents inside had no name on the label, only a single handwritten post-it note stuck to the front. "Open only when it can no longer be ignored." He parked beside the sheriff's cruiser, killed the engine, and sat for 10 seconds breathing through his nose. Then he stepped out. The scene had changed in those 12 minutes. 2 more news vans had arrived, one from Albany, one from the Atlanta affiliate. Reporters were already setting up tripods along the edge of the lot. A small crowd had gathered near the pumps, locals who had seen the flashing lights on their way to church, a few teenagers filming with their phones held high, the diesel truck drivers who had stepped down from their cabs to watch. Patricia Coleman's Honda Civic was still parked exactly where it had been. She had not moved, had not stopped recording. Haynes walked straight to Pute without looking at anyone else. "Inside the store," he said quietly.
"Now."
Pute nodded once. He glanced at Diane, still standing beside her Tahoe, arms folded, expression unreadable, then led Haynes through the glass doors of the Buckhorn Fuel and Food. Todd Whitfield, the attendant who had made the original call, was behind the counter pretending to restock candy bars. He froze when he saw the two men enter. "Back room," Haynes said to Todd. The kid didn't argue. In the cramped storage area, shelves of motor oil, cases of energy drinks, the faint smell of stale coffee. Haynes set the briefcase on a folding table and clicked the latches open. Pute watched, arms crossed, trying to project calm.
"What is this, Bob?"
"You got something I need to know?" Haynes didn't answer right away. He removed a thick manila folder, 3 inches thick, edges worn from years of handling, and laid it flat. Then another folder, then a third, each labeled with dates and case numbers in his own precise handwriting. "I've been keeping these since 2016, Haynes said finally. "Every complaint that came across my desk involving your department. Every one you told me to handle quietly. Every one the State Oversight Board never saw, because you classified them internal only." Pute's face remained stone, but a muscle jumped in his cheek.
"That's privileged," he said.
"No," Haynes replied. "That's public record the moment a federal agent is unlawfully detained on video in your jurisdiction. And there are at least 6 cameras rolling out there right now." He opened the top folder. Page 1. A 2017 complaint from a black motorist pulled over for failure to maintain lane. Dashcam showed no lane violation. Officer used excessive force during the stop. Case closed unsubstantiated after 48 hours. Page 2, 2018. A Hispanic family detained at a county fair for suspicious behavior. Children separated from parents for 90 minutes. No charges filed. Internal review. Training opportunity. Page 3, 2019, earlier this year. A retired black postal worker stopped while walking his dog after dark. Officer claimed the man matched a description. Man was tossed after reaching for his phone to call his wife. Medical bills, $4,800. Complaint closed without interview. Haynes kept turning pages. 47 formal complaints in 11 years. 0 sustained. 0 officer discipline. 0 referrals to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Pattern after pattern after pattern. Pute stared at the stack like it was a live grenade. "You kept copies," he said, voice low. "I kept everything," Haynes corrected, "because I knew one day someone would come asking. And today that someone is standing in your parking lot wearing a federal badge." Outside, Diane had not moved. She was speaking quietly on her phone again, likely to Holden or the field office duty agent, giving coordinates, describing the scene, confirming that she remained safe, but would not leave until federal personnel arrived. Haynes closed the folders. "I'm going to walk out there and speak to Special Agent Carter," he said. "I'm going to tell her that the county is cooperating fully, that we are turning over every record in my possession, that we are requesting immediate DOJ oversight. And if you try to interfere with any of that, Dale, I will personally file the motion to have you removed from office pending criminal investigation." Pute opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in the conversation, he looked small. Haynes picked up the briefcase. "One more thing," he added. "The moment those federal agents walk through your station doors tomorrow, and they will, the first thing they'll ask for is your body cam and in-car video retention logs. Every stop, every interaction, every deleted file. If even one frame is missing, that's spoliation of evidence. Federal felony." He paused at the door. "You built this house, Dale. Now it's burning. And I'm not going down with it." Haynes stepped back into the sunlight. Diane looked up as he approached. She recognized him immediately, not from prior contact, but from the way he carried himself, the measured walk of a man who had spent decades in courtrooms and knew exactly when the verdict was already written. "Special Agent Carter," Haynes said, extending his hand. "Robert Haynes, Calhoun County Attorney. I'm here to tell you the county is fully cooperating. I have compiled records of prior complaints against this department that I believe are directly relevant to today's incident. I am prepared to turn them over to your office or the DOJ immediately. Diane studied him for a long moment. Why now? She asked. Haynes glanced back toward the store, where Pute still stood in the doorway, watching. Because, he said quietly, some files are only meant to be opened when the right person is standing in the right parking lot. And in that moment, with news helicopters beginning to thump overhead and the first federal SUV cresting the horizon on Route 9, the story that had simmered in silence for 15 years finally broke into daylight. Within the hour, the first team of DOJ civil rights investigators arrived. 2 agents in plain suits, carrying briefcases and wearing expressions that said they had seen departments like this one before. But what they uncovered in the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office records room over the next 48 hours would turn a single Sunday morning stop into the largest pattern or practice investigation Georgia had seen in a decade. The first 2 DOJ Civil Rights Division investigators arrived at the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office just before noon that Sunday. Plain gray suits, no ties, briefcases that looked ordinary until you noticed the reinforced corners and combination locks. They did not introduce themselves with fanfare. They simply presented credentials at the front desk, asked for the records supervisor by name, and requested immediate access to the department's internal affairs archive, body cam retention server, and all citizen complaint logs from 2008 forward. The desk sergeant hesitated exactly long enough for one of the agents to say, quietly, "This is not a request, Sergeant. Federal authority under 34 U.S.C. Section 12601. You can comply now, or we can return with a court order and U.S. Marshals within the hour." The sergeant complied. By 12:45 p.m., the 2 agents were in the records room, a windowless basement space smelling of old paper, dust, and the faint metallic tang of server fans. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Metal cabinets lined 3 walls. A rack of external hard drives hummed in the corner. The records clerk, a woman named Sandra Howell who had worked there for 23 years, unlocked the cabinets without being asked twice. She had seen complaints come and go. She had watched them get stamped closed before anyone outside the department ever read them. Today felt different. The agents worked methodically. One pulled physical files. The other connected a forensic laptop to the server and began running queries. They did not speak much. They did not need to. The numbers told the story faster than words ever could. By 2:17 p.m., they had the first pattern. 47 formal citizen complaints against Sheriff Dale Pute's department between 2008 and 2019. 0 sustained findings. 0 officer terminations. 0 referrals to the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, POST. Racial disparity was stark even at first glance. Black residents made up 31% of the county population but accounted for 68% of traffic stops, per GCIC data cross-referenced from state reports. Black motorists were 3.4 times more likely to be searched during a stop than white motorists. Use of force incidents involving black subjects were closed as within policy in 94% of reviewed cases, even when body cam footage showed baton strikes after suspects were already prone and handcuffed. Sandra Howell stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching them work. She had never spoken up before. She had never had to, but today she cleared her throat.
"There's more," she said.
The agents looked up. She walked to a locked lateral file cabinet in the far corner. One Pute had personally ordered installed in 2015 with a combination only he and the chief deputy knew. Sandra had watched the locksmith install it. She had also watched Pute change the combination every January 1st using the same 4-digit sequence, his daughter's birthday. Sandra entered 0-7-1-4. The drawer slid open. Inside were 3 accordion folders labeled only with years: 2015, 2016, 2017. No case numbers. No official stamps. Just handwritten notes in Pute's blocky script clipped to the front of each. The agents photographed every page before touching anything. The agents photographed every page before touching anything. What they found were the off-book complaints, the ones never entered into the official system. Phone calls to Pute's personal cell, walk-ins that never made it past the lobby, emails forwarded from council members asking the sheriff to handle quietly. Handwritten apologies the department forced complainants to sign before releasing impounded vehicles. One note, dated March 2017, read simply, "Paid medical bill out of petty cash. Complainant signed NDA equivalent. Closed." By 4:30 p.m., the lead agent placed a secure call to the section chief in Washington. "We have probable cause for pattern or practice," he reported. "Disparate impact is clear. Systemic suppression of complaints is documented. We're looking at least 15 years of protected misconduct. Recommend full investigation team, forensic audit of all servers, and immediate preservation order on every device in the building." The section chief's reply was short. "Approved. Team deploys tomorrow morning. Secure the facility tonight. No one in or out without your sign-off." Back in the parking lot at Buckhorn, now cordoned off with yellow tape, the crowd had grown to nearly 100. Local news had gone live. National outlets were picking up the feed. Diane Carter remained exactly where she had been standing for hours, beside her Tahoe, arms folded, watching the slow convergence of accountability. She had not spoken to the press. She had not given interviews. She had simply waited. At 5:12 p.m., Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Holden arrived in an unmarked Suburban with 3 more agents. She walked straight to Diane and embraced her. Brief, professional, but real. "You okay?" Holden asked. Diane nodded once. "I'm fine, but this department isn't." Holden glanced toward the sheriff's cruiser, still parked where Pute had left it. The lights were off now. Pute himself had not been seen since he retreated into the store with the county attorney. "He's still inside," Diane said. "Talking to his lawyer, probably." Holden smiled thinly. "Good. He'll need one." That evening, as the sun dropped behind the pines and the first stars appeared over Route 9, the DOJ team began arriving in force. Vans, tech trucks, auditors, interview specialists. They set up a mobile command post in the Buckhorn lot itself, right where the cuffs had clicked shut that morning. Sheriff Dale Pute watched from the window of the convenience store's back office, hands in his pockets, face illuminated by the blue glow of television screens showing his own cruiser on every channel. He had been right 1,000 times before. He had walked into situations exactly like this and walked out untouched. This time the ground had already shifted, and the people who had spent years waiting for someone to listen were finally being heard. When the full DOJ investigative team swept the sheriff's station at dawn the next morning, the first thing they found in Pute's personal office drawer was not a badge or a gun. It was a handwritten ledger of favors owed by local officials, council members, and even one state senator. And that ledger would be the key that unlocked not just his career, but the careers of everyone who had looked the other way for 15 years. Dawn broke cold and gray over the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office on Monday morning. By 6:15 a.m., the parking lot already looked like a federal staging area. 3 unmarked Suburbans, 2 white cargo vans with tinted windows, a mobile forensics trailer, and 6 black SUVs bearing discreet DOJ plates. No sirens, no lights, just quiet, efficient movement, the kind that signals the end of one era and the beginning of accountability. The lead investigator, Supervisory Special Agent Marcus Reed, a 15-year veteran of pattern or practice cases, walked through the front doors first. He carried nothing but his credentials and a single sheet of paper, the preservation order signed at 2:47 a.m. by a federal judge in Atlanta. Every device in the building, phones, computers, servers, body cams, in-car cameras, was now under federal seal. Deleting anything after receipt of that order would constitute felony evidence tampering. Sheriff Dale Pute was already there, waiting in his office in full uniform, hat on the desk, coffee untouched. He had not slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, but the jaw was still set in that granite line that had intimidated so many for so long. Reed did not sit. "Sheriff Pute," he said, voice level, "we're here pursuant to an authorized investigation under the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are required to cooperate fully. That includes immediate access to your personal office, all electronic devices, and any off-book records." Pute gestured toward the desk drawers. "Help yourself." Reed nodded to 2 agents behind him. They moved in, gloved hands opening drawers methodically. The third drawer on the right was locked. Pute slid a key across the desk without being asked. Inside lay a slim, leather-bound ledger. Black, no title, edges frayed from years of use. The agents lifted it out carefully, as though it were explosive. They opened it on the desk. Page after page of neat columns. Dates, names, amounts, favors. Councilman T. Ellis. $2,500 campaign contribution. Dismissed speeding ticket for son. March 14th, 17. Judge Harlan Crow. Fishing trip to Lake Seminole. Dropped DUI charge against nephew. November 9th, 18. State Senator R. Caldwell. Private dinner. Atlanta. Quashed post inquiry into deputy misconduct. June 22nd, 19. And lower down, in fresher ink. Whitfield complaint. Gas station attendant tip. Handled per protocol. No further action. Pute watched them read. His hands stayed flat on the desk. That's personal notes, he said. Not department records. Reed looked up. It's a record of public corruption transactions involving a sworn law enforcement officer. That makes it very much our concern. They photographed every page. Then they sealed the ledger in an evidence bag. By 8:30 a.m., the interviews began. Deputy Greg Fenton was first. He sat in a small conference room, no lawyer present yet. The agents read him his rights anyway. Fenton spoke for nearly 4 hours. He described the culture. Complaints routed directly to Pute, never logged properly. Training sessions that were really just cover-your-ass briefings. Stops that escalated because the sheriff liked results. He named names, other deputies, sergeants, even the former chief deputy who had retired rather than stay under Pute. He produced his own phone, personal, not department issued, and showed text threads from 2018 onward. Pute directing him to lose body cam footage of a use of force incident. Another message reading, training day. Remember, no video equals no problem. Fenton did not cry. He did not apologize. He simply talked, calm, factual, exhausted. I have a 2-year-old daughter, he said at one point. I want to be able to look her in the eye in 20 years. The agents listened without interrupting. When he finished, they asked one question. Would you testify to this under oath? Fenton nodded once. Yes. Word spread through the department like smoke. By noon, 3 more deputies had asked to speak privately. One brought a thumb drive of deleted body cam files he had recovered from a personal backup. Another produced printed emails she had saved, proof that complaints were being rerouted before they ever hit the official system. Meanwhile, outside, the national story had exploded. CNN ran the Patricia Coleman footage on loop with it cheering. FBI agent handcuffed at Georgia gas station. DOJ launches full investigation. MSNBC booked civil rights attorneys. Fox framed it as overreach, but even their panelists struggled to defend the optics. Back inside, Reed's team moved to the server room. The forensic techs found the first red flag within minutes. Multiple bulk deletions from the body cam archive dated the day before, Saturday, the day Pute had undoubtedly sensed trouble brewing after Diane's call to Holden. The deletions were sloppy. Fragments remained. Enough to reconstruct at least 17 incidents previously marked training only. By late afternoon, Reed placed another secure call, this time to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Georgia. We have sufficient evidence for RICO predicate acts, he reported. Public corruption, conspiracy to deprive rights under color of law, obstruction of justice. We're looking at multiple indictments, starting with the sheriff. The U.S. Attorney's reply was immediate. Move forward. Grand jury impaneled tomorrow. That evening, as the mobile command post lights burned against the darkening sky, Special Agent Diane Carter finally left the Buckhorn lot. She drove the Tahoe straight to the Atlanta field office, 4 hours away, arriving just before midnight. Supervisory Special Agent Holden was waiting with fresh coffee and a debrief room already set up. Diane sat. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said simply, "It wasn't about me." Holden nodded. "We know." Diane looked out the window at the city lights. But it had to be someone like me for anyone to listen. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning in the federal courthouse in Albany, Sheriff Dale Pute stood before a judge in a courtroom packed with reporters, former deputies, and the people whose complaints had finally been heard, facing not just the end of his career, but the beginning of a sentence that would ensure Calhoun County never forgot the Sunday morning a routine gas stop changed everything. October 17th, 2020, Albany Federal Courthouse, Courtroom 3B. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder, reporters, civil rights attorneys, former deputies who had quietly resigned, local residents who had driven 2 hours just to be in the room. Patricia Coleman sat in the third row, still carrying the same phone that had recorded everything 17 months earlier. She had upgraded to a newer model, but she kept the original footage backed up in 3 different clouds. Just in case. Sheriff Dale Pute, former sheriff now, stood at the defense table in a charcoal suit that hung loosely on him. He had lost 40 pounds since March 2019. The granite jaw was still there, but the eyes were hollow. Beside him sat his attorney, a high-dollar Atlanta litigator who had already billed more than the county could afford. Across the aisle, the U.S. Attorney's team waited with quiet confidence. No theatrics. No closing arguments left to make. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours the previous afternoon. Judge Eleanor Vasquez entered at 9:02 a.m. Everyone rose. She settled behind the bench, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Pute. Would the defendant please rise? Pute stood. His hands were clasped in front of him, knuckles white. The jury has returned a verdict, Judge Vasquez said. On count 1, conspiracy to deprive persons of rights under color of law, guilty. Count 2, obstruction of justice, guilty. Count 3, pattern of racketeering activity under RICO, guilty. Count 4, civil rights conspiracy, guilty. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Not shock, relief. The judge continued reading the counts. 11 in total. Guilty on every one. Pute did not react outwardly. He had known this was coming since the day the ledger left his desk in an evidence bag. Judge Vasquez set the verdict form aside. Mr. Pute, you have spent 11 years as the elected sheriff of Calhoun County. During that time, you turned the badge you swore to uphold into a tool of intimidation, corruption, and racial discrimination. You did not merely fail to protect the people of your county. You actively harmed them. You buried complaints. You rewarded loyalty over integrity. You created an environment where deputies believed they could act with impunity. She paused, letting the words settle. The sentence of this court is as follows. On the RICO count alone, you are sentenced to 168 months, 14 years in federal prison, to be served consecutively with the sentences on the civil rights and obstruction counts, for a total of 240 months, 20 years, with no possibility of parole before 15 years served. You are ordered to forfeit all assets derived from or traceable to the racketeering activity, including but not limited to your pension, personal real property acquired during your tenure, and any campaign funds still held in trust. Restitution in the amount of $4.2 million will be paid to identified victims, to be administered through a court-supervised fund. She looked at him one final time. You built a wall of silence around your department. Today that wall comes down. The gavel fell. Pute was led away in cuffs. No one in the gallery cheered. They simply watched him go. Outside the courthouse, Diane Carter stood on the steps in a navy blazer and jeans, aviators hiding her eyes. She had not testified. She had not needed to. The footage, the ledger, Fenton's cooperation, Sandra Howell's files, the server logs, they had spoken louder than any witness stand ever could. A reporter approached. Agent Carter, any comment on the verdict? Diane removed her sunglasses. I didn't come here for vengeance, she said. I came here because someone had to stand still long enough for the system to catch up. Today it did. That's enough. She walked down the steps toward a waiting Suburban. Inside sat Supervisory Special Agent Holden and Deputy Director Carl Jameson. They drove away quietly, no lights, no sirens. 6 months after sentencing, the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office was placed under federal consent decree. Mandatory body cams with cloud backup. Civilian Oversight Board with subpoena power. Independent auditor reviewing every traffic stop for 2 years. 47 previously buried complaints were reopened. 12 resulted in civil settlements totaling $8.7 million paid by the county's insurer. Greg Fenton resigned the week after the verdict. He moved his family to Asheville, North Carolina, took a job in corporate security, and never spoke publicly again. But he did send Diane a single email 6 months later. "Thank you for staying calm that morning. It gave me the space to finally do the right thing." Sandra Howell retired early. She used part of her severance to start a small nonprofit helping residents file and track police complaints. She named it the Coleman Haynes Initiative, after the retired teacher who pressed record and the county attorney who finally opened the drawer. Robert Haynes ran unopposed for re-election in 2020 and won by the largest margin of his career.
In his victory speech, he said,
"I kept that file because I believed the moment would come. I just didn't expect it to arrive in a gas station parking lot on a Sunday morning." Diane Carter returned to Atlanta. She was promoted to supervisory special agent in 2021. She still drives the same black Tahoe, new tires, fresh oil, same federal plates. She still gets gas at whatever station is convenient. She still checks her phone while the tank fills. But now, when she looks up at the sky, she sometimes thinks of a retired schoolteacher sitting in a Honda Civic, thumb on the record button, deciding in that quiet instant that someone should bear witness. Because justice, in the end, isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's the slow accumulation of ordinary people refusing to look away. One complaint filed, one video saved, one file opened, one phone call made, until the wait becomes too much to ignore. And on a Sunday morning in 2019, at pump number 4 in Buckhorn Fuel and Food, that wait finally arrived.